Okay, hello everyone. Thanks for joining this Google Hangout. The next in the series we are doing as part of the MCN Special Interest Group Data and Insights. Today, hello everyone. Thanks for joining this Google Hangout. The next in the series we are doing as part of the MCN Special Interest Group.
Just one second, as I'm having some audio problems.
Today, hello everyone. Thanks for joining.
Okay, now it seems. Trilce, can you continue, as I'm having some issues right now with my...
Yes, of course. Hello everybody, and welcome to this Data and Insight Hangout. As Elena was starting to mention, we're doing this series of Hangouts where we invite different members of the community to talk about a particular subject, and it's really nice that we're able to do this live so that people can give us questions, and hopefully our speakers today will have great answers to, in this case, to further the discussion on dashboards. Do you want to continue, Elena? Are you okay, or should I go on further?
Yeah, go further.
Okay. So I guess perhaps it's good just to introduce our speakers briefly, and then each speaker will have about 10 minutes to give a presentation, and then we'll do a little wrap-up, and then we will have time for discussion. It's probably best if the audience has questions, you can type them in, or you can send them via Twitter using the hashtags Museum Metrics, and we will be able to follow that as well and hopefully answer all of your questions. Let's see. So we will start with Angie Judge. She's the CEO of Dexibit, and she's very early in the morning, so we're very happy that she's able to join us with these different time zones. She will be presenting some of the opportunities that some institutions have by using dashboards and what you can do with analytics looking at these dashboards. Then we will have Jeffrey Inshaw. I forgot to ask you how to pronounce your name. Yeah, he's based in Pittsburgh, and he's working, well, he's been working with a number of things, but some of the experiences from Carnegie Museums, and mildly, I have to read this, mildly obsessed with the collision of culture and technology. Aren't we all? So that's great. Jeffrey will be also presenting some of a very specific case study of one institution. And so this is a good balance to then close with Joris Beckel, who's working with Europeana dashboard, and he's going to be presenting some of the experience sort of from a very large perspective, working with a number of institutions together. So I give the floor to Angie.
Thank you very much to both of you for having us today. Can you hear me okay? Am I coming through all right? Wonderful. I'm just going to screen share for my slides. And Elena, is that working all right?
Yeah, there is a bit of delay, but yeah, it's working fine.
Okay, wonderful. Well, today I want to talk about three things in 10 minutes. What goes into a dashboard, what makes a good dashboard, and how we get there. So I'll jump straight into it. Let's start with what goes into the dashboard itself. And I think this is really important because when we talk about dashboards, we often preoccupy ourselves with what's happening at the surface level, and that's of course really important, but we want that user experience to be beautiful and seamless and insightful, but I think it's also important to see dashboards equally in terms of what happens behind the scenes as much as what appears on the front. Do excuse the picture of a duck. We often talk about dashboard's a bit like a swimming duck where everything looks beautifully calm on the surface, but there is a lot of hard work going on behind the scenes under the water that most of us don't see. So today I wanted to give you just a little picture into what happens behind there. There are, in my mind, 3 key tiers to achieving a dashboard, and this is what we refer to as the systems architecture of the solution. If we work bottom up, we begin with that database tier. So this is about how we harvest data, the various sources that we get it from. We might be streaming it or storing it, and this could be as simple as something like an Excel spreadsheet, something mid-market like Postgres, or it might be something that's handling a big data requirement, so it might be a technology like Hadoop. And the second set there is the application tier, so that's where the hard work happens. And if we are skipping this step and going straight from database to UI, we're not really doing a lot in terms of helping our users glean insight from our data. So I think here it's important to look at how we can take opportunities for clustering and other analysis to blend our data sets together and that sort of thing. So again, depending on the scale of our solution, this could be as simple as something like a formula in a spreadsheet, or it could be a fully built functional solution at the other end of the scale. And then the third final layer is the user interface, which is of course what today is all about, and this is where the beautiful visualization's happening, and our technologies here are hopefully reference libraries of existing tool sets, because there is a lot out there already that we don't need to custom build from scratch. At Dexibit we use a combination of tool sets like Varden and D3. But the user interface tier is, in my mind, about a lot more than just presentation, so I'll get to that a little bit later as well. And so just to explore a touch more on how the data comes into the dashboard, I just wanted to talk through a couple of common approaches to the integration behind it, the magic or perhaps the man behind the curtain for the dashboard itself. And again, this is very important because without it, the dashboard would be blank. So when we're setting out an implementation, it's really important to go through each one of our sources of data and work out the best method or approach that we're going to use for each one. So it could be purely a return on investment decision. There might be a lot of business value in scheduling something to work automatically, or there might be a clear business case from avoiding copying and pasting. So the first approach is live integration, holy grail. So this might be streaming, like we talked about before. It might be looking at a feed without taking our own copy. It might be a data store where we are keeping a version for ourselves. So the question becomes how quickly we need that information. We often talk about things being in real time. Technically, that's sort of getting down to sub-second level. I think in the museum's case, often the definition of live is probably a better one to work with, because it might be something that in a sub-hourly basis is sufficient for our needs. The second approach is about syncing. This is more useful for when we need to write changes to our data in multiple places. Think, for example, of a visitor record that we want to contribute to from multiple systems without having dual entry happening for our users. And then the third approach is, of course, traditional migration. So it might be quite expensive to say do a live integration for maybe a custom ticketing solution. So we might be using what a developer would refer to as ETL, or sort of an extract, transform, and load process. It might be done manually, or it might indeed be scripted behind the scenes too. So lastly, before we get into the fun part, I just wanted to touch on how that all hangs together. So all of this means behind the dashboard we need to think about how our data is coming together, and I think it's really useful, even if it's just on the back of an envelope, to sort of jot out a quick enterprise architecture. And it helps us determine the scope of our dashboard too. Like, is it just to do with web? Are we looking at just online or digital metrics? Is it just the visitor experience, or are we sort of going across a complete view? And this is one here of our original systems framework, which we've released as Creative Commons non-commercial. So if you'd like to download it, you're most welcome to. So more importantly, what makes a good dashboard, the bells and whistles, if you like, of that front end. For me, being an ex-business analyst, these are sort of my requirement hit list, and more about the delivery mechanism than necessarily the presentation. So just to call a couple of these things out, say looking top down, for example, if we're dealing with someone that has several sites, so say the Smithsonian, for example, 19 different museums, we wouldn't want an isolated dashboard for every single venue. I can imagine there would be a great business case in having an aggregate view across all the venues in one single account with different dashboarding displays for each site. So we're looking for something in that sense that is multi-tenant. And in the same line of thinking, when it comes to our users, again, we don't want every single person to have exactly the same view with exactly the same permission. So we'll be looking for an identity access control there to be able to start personalizing what each person is looking at, and perhaps the level of access that they might have to data. So just skipping through a couple of those, we might want to, for example, think about making sure that we're designing for mobile. I think these days it would be fair to assume that most of our users would be accessing information from a variety of different devices. It might be too that we need to consider the refresh rate, because we might be putting our dashboard up on big screens and not want to have to hit the refresh button every time we want to update it. So the next question becomes what data we actually need. It could be quite strategic, like this level here, which is focused on KPIs, or it might be more a drill down to an analytical level. We've done a little bit of research on this topic, and these for us are the top 30 data points that most museums want at the higher level. This is a fairly basic way of looking at data, and I'll have a look at a couple of other examples soon. But my key points here are a few design tips on how information is presented. So we want everything in a single view to fit at least on one page so that we can see it at a quick glance, and then drill down into it later on. We want some categorization and grouping rather than just sort of throwing everything at the wall. I think it's really important to show context of trend lines, whether that's sort of a quick up or down or a spark line, and to keep things as visual as we can. And to give you a couple of other examples, that was quite a plain way of looking at data volumetric. We can also look at sort of statistical and illustrative information as well. So to take a look at a couple of different examples of what those are, I think there's a great benefit to thinking about how we visualize data for either our internal dashboarding purposes, or say, for example, on visitor behavior, or something quite different in terms of how we perceive our collection and share that with the public. So take the top right there, we might be more familiar with this as something like a weather map, but it would be a great way for us to, for example, show visualizations on visitor dwell time, but equally to show the concentration of our collection's origin. So lastly, just to recap quickly before I finish up, a couple of top tips on how to implement this sort of data. So I think it's important that before we implement, we really take some time to analyze what our requirements are, who we're designing for, and work backwards from there about what data they need access to, how often, and what the business case is, and how they best consume that. I think it's important to champion change, so make sure that everybody top down is using the dashboard and that is very visible throughout the organization. And lastly, I think it's really important to instrument the metric of dashboard usage itself. So how many people are using it, how often they're referring to it, how much time they're spending on it. I think that's a really useful implementation metric to monitor, particularly given everyone's in the world of analytics at this point, to see how that's rolling out. And the two scenarios I think finally that we really want to avoid here is either over or underuse. So the idea of maybe developing a dashboard and then nobody refers to it, but also the flip side of developing a dashboard and then everybody uses it perhaps a little too aggressively, making a lot of flippant decisions without understanding the context of data. So that's where the communication and education is really important, to make sure that everybody understands the information that they're getting, where it's coming from, and what the context of that is for the best decision making. So that's it from me. I'll hand over back to you, Elena, and look forward to the other presenters.
Sure, thanks Angie a lot. I think now my audio is fine. I was hearing myself like 2 or 3 times at the same time, so it was very confusing. So this is a great start, and thanks for the best practice in terms of how to define, develop, and implement a dashboard. Dashboards are being developed in a range of museums and other cultural institutions. We have examples like the Smithsonian, Cleveland Museum of Art. Many years ago, Indianapolis Museum of Art was one of the pioneers in making like dashboards and making them also accessible data to everyone. So now we have a couple of case studies. We can go with you, Jeffrey. You want to talk
Sure.
about the dashboard you're working on? Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks. Can everybody, Elena, can you see the slides okay? I think so. Okay. So hey everybody, thanks. My name is Jeff Insko. I'm with the Innovation Studio at Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh. First, thanks to Elena and Trilsa and MCN Data Insights SIG for hosting this today. It's great. Also thanks to Angie and Joris for co-presenting. Carnegie Museums of Pittsburgh is, it includes the Carnegie Museum of Art, Carnegie Museum of Natural History, the Andy Warhol Museum, and the Carnegie Science Center. So it's kind of an umbrella across multiple institutions. And about a year ago, I was tasked with kind of developing and leading a new department here at CMP that's focused on thinking about and optimizing the organization for the future. But before we get into the digital metrics dashboard that I'm going to talk about to you today, I think it's important that we give a little bit of context about how the dashboard project aligns with our overall studio's mission. So the Innovation Studio is the research, design, and development laboratory at CMP, and we're a collective of cultural technologists thinking about and attempting to transform our museums for the future. And that's kind of lofty and very cerebral, as most missions are. But what it really means is that we're harnessing the urgency created by emerging technologies as a catalyst for kind of this idea of holistic institutional change. And we're trying to transform a legacy institution with more than a century of kind of organizational processes and baggage into an efficient and thriving participant in the modern world. We're kind of doing that by focusing on 4 key areas. The first thing is 21st century digital infrastructure, things like collection APIs, open data, frictionless e-commerce, that sort of thing. Delightful experiences, both on-site and online. Creative partnerships between technology companies and the museums. And then finally, this idea of organizational adaptation. And that's really where the dashboard fits into our philosophy and our strategy. And when we talk about organizational adaptation, the studio is really serving as this kind of internal resource that is working to lift digital knowledge and skill sets across CMP and enable adaptation throughout the organization. So enter the digital metrics dashboard. This is public. It's at dashboard.carnegiemuseums.org. And when we started the studio last year, we quickly realized that there was no way to tell the kind of holistic story of CMP's digital footprint. Each museum had their own kind of analytics instances, social media efforts were siloed, physical attendance analytics were siloed, and the directors and fundraisers, development officers, didn't really have quick and easy access to the information that they should know, right? And so what we did is we just, put this idea of a dashboard together out to the studio team, and one of our developers, Drew McDermott, kind of took ownership of it and made it his project. And we shipped this public alpha, which is our initial stab at starting to kind of really look at the interrelated and connectedness of our digital properties across multiple museums. And the dashboard, it's important to say that this dashboard is not for nerds like me or Drew who can get into Google Analytics and really drill down and see intricate pathways. But this is for museum leadership. This is for directors. This is for fundraisers to really give them quick and easy access. One key feature that really illustrates some of our design thinking is this big prominent block of text that kind of hits you in the face when you come to the URL. This is a paragraph summary, basically dynamic text generated from Google Analytics, because what we did is we found that museum leadership really needed and desired a quick and easy snapshot in plain English, right? The key message. Not as a graph, but as something that they could read. And this text changes based on the selectors and filters that a user chooses when they're viewing the dashboard. So some default selectors that we just kind of baked in from the beginning are page views, unique users, and physical admission, so that we can start to see the impact of web traffic on physical attendance, and this is kind of where we started with this. We also included some secondary selectors. That's the bottom row that you see there, where we were curious about the impact of social media and other kind of digital efforts on web traffic and our digital footprint. So the Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram selectors overlay high traffic points on our graph timeline so that we can see, the Warhol Museum with almost 1 million Twitter followers tweeted a link and it generated this much traffic to the website. Another thing which I found to be really interesting is this Anomalies selector. And the anomalies, basically what Drew has done here is done some standard deviation on page views to call out kind of high traffic anomalies. For instance, you can see here, this is the Carnegie Science Center's segmented dashboard. And you can see here that the iOS iPad floor map had 86 views, which is 30 times higher on a random Wednesday morning. And so it's information like this, right? So could the Science Center anticipate heavy traffic that day based on this information? Or maybe the marketing team sent out an email message that had a link to this. So it's kind of looking at a holistic kind of impact. And this anomalies function is something that we're really interested in and looking at developing further. We also have integrated social media based on the where you are in the dashboard. We kind of track number of followers, the change in followers, and then also top pages visited from certain tweets or top tweets and posts to kind of show what type of messaging is resonating with audiences as well. If the top tweet every month is an image of a cat from the Warhol, then you can learn from that, I guess. It's maybe something. So the whole thing is open source on GitHub. That's part of the ethos of the Innovation Studio. We design and develop out in the open and try to be as transparent as possible with it. So feel free to fork the code. We do. We encourage that, and that's why we do it all out in the open. So our roadmap for this, obviously this is kind of like our first stab, and we placed this on an iterative development roadmap, which basically means that right now we ship the first version, we're learning from our stakeholders, we're gathering feedback, we are hearing what maybe some features that we didn't think of that would be important to them. And then we're obviously identifying bugs. There are a couple bugs in the dashboard. On June 1st, Instagram changed its API, so we had to quickly identify what was going on and put that as a bug fix. But version 2, will be worked on later this summer, and we'll roll some of these changes back into it to improve and grow and build out the dashboard. That is it for me. If you have any questions, either even after this Hangout, you can get in touch with the studio at our URL. There's an email contact form there, and also on Twitter. So happy to share, and if you have any ideas or insights into how we can improve the dashboard, that would be fantastic. So I'm going to go ahead and stop screen sharing and pass it over to Elena.
Thanks a lot, Jeffrey. Very interesting case study I've been following up. Yeah, the dashboard, I mean, from version 1 and now it looks great. So yeah, I have some questions for later in terms of working with stakeholders and all the definition process of metrics. And so we just to remind everyone, we will have at the end of all the presentations some time for Q&A, so you can send us our questions via the Google Plus Hangout page, or you can send them via Twitter using the hashtag musedata. So now let's go with Joris whenever you're ready. Thank you.
Yep. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Hello, so thank you for giving me the opportunity to talk a bit about the Europeana dashboard. Before I start with going deeper into the dashboard, I think it's necessary to tell you very briefly something about the project Europeana. So we are not a cultural institution. We are a European-funded project which aims to give everybody access to European heritage. And we do that by aggregating collection data, metadata, from, at the moment, around 3,800 institutions from around Europe. So let me start the screen sharing. So this is the Europeana homepage, and as you can see, we currently give access to about 53 million artworks, books, videos, and sounds, etc. So we've been doing this for about 7 years now, and so Europeana is completely dependent on the cultural institutions sharing the information with Europeana. Europeana serves as a traffic generator for them, among other things. The problem we had before the dashboard, that this was very difficult to make clear to cultural institutions, because Europeana was a bit of a, you could say, a bit of a black box. You would put your data in, and that obviously takes time, needs a little bit of work and resources, but what do you actually get out of it? So that was the first reason we wanted to create this dashboard. The second one is that it gives me and a couple of my colleagues a very nice tool to see what kind of collections are more popular than others, basically what works. And this is not only on the topic level, but also very much on the data quality level, that we can basically have more proof that unique titles are useful when you make your collection available online, that open licenses attract more users to your collection, etc. And another very practical reason was that we would get a lot of requests from institutions to pull out the metrics data from Google Analytics manually, and that was a lot of work because we do have 3,800 cultural institutions. So that's why we started developing the Europeana Statistics Dashboard. That's this one. We launched it in the beginning of April. It's a beta version. This is very much a first version that we want to test, bug fixes, but it's completely open. And yeah, I'm going to dig into it a little bit more. So basically, we show statistics on 4 levels: Europeana as a whole, statistics per country, and statistics by culture institution, and finally statistics by aggregator. That's very briefly, Europeana works with national and domain-specific aggregators that then work with the culture institution. So they are kind of our middleman locally, because we can't really work with 3,800 institutions directly. So yeah, I'll just show you something and then go a bit more into the technicalities of the dashboard. So as it is the beta version, it's pretty high level. It's first of all, we started, of course, with some user research. We asked the institutions what kind of metrics would you find interesting, and obviously views was mentioned the most, because this is the kind of material that they can put in their annual reports, for example, and they can feed back into their management discussions and decisions to see if it's worth it working with Europeana, worth it sharing your collection online, and so on. We added this bar, which gives a little more of, just quick numbers, total views in a particular year, and compare them to a previous year. The amount of images, or the amount of items, and what kind of types they are. As Europeana is a big advocate for open licenses and copyright reform in general, I would say, we also added the information about the rights status of the works being given by the culture institution, also with the hope that we can make more insightful that open collections are more access than others. And yeah, so where do people come from? But I think this is quite an interesting one, the top items. So we basically show the top 25 items for a particular institution. And I find this for 2 reasons interesting. One is it basically gives you a new way of browsing Europeana, so you can see what have other people been looking at, what have they found interesting, and you can follow that. But from an analytics perspective, I find it quite interesting that, for example, in May, this collection had nearly 45,000 views, but if you go into May, you'll see that the top 25 makes a very small percentage of that, and this really shows that for us, but also the institution, that Europeana is very much a place for not so much your most popular items of your collection, because we think that other platforms like Google Art Project and Google itself do a pretty good job in making those findable, but that Europeana is much more on the long tail. To give you an example from an institution, so here you can search through these 3,800 institutions. So this is probably the most famous institution in the Netherlands, the Rijksmuseum. And what you can see in their top 25 items, these are not only their masterpieces that they have in the big central hallway, and everybody, most people in the world know about. It's much more smaller stuff, some drawings, Japanese art, fashion. And if I would pull this further in Google Analytics to the top 100, top 500, you really see that it's more like the unknown material that's being found through a project like Europeana. I very briefly wanted to tell you how it works. So if you have, let's see what this. Now I'm searching for everything. So Basically, what we do, all this data is a combination from two APIs: the Europeana API with the collection data, and our Google Analytics API. And this has been actually by far the trickiest part to get right and get accurate data, because what you need to do is fully automated filter out the records that belong to a particular institution. The issue we had with this is that Google counts the URLs, and the only unique thing we have there is this little part. Maybe I'm going into too much detail now, but this little part, which is the dataset number. So what we do is we get the collection, we get the name of the cultural institution, find all datasets associated to that, and run that as a filter through Google Analytics to pull back the traffic data. And that combined with the information that you see in, so for example, these thumbnails, the titles, that is what we get from the Europeana API, same as these kind of more factual information, how many number of items and so on. I think that was what I wanted to tell you, and I'm happy to take questions later. Thanks.
Well, great. Thank you all three for the very interesting presentations. I guess if I'm just to do a 1 minute wrap up. Whoops, that's the bell. Great for keeping in time for the three speakers. But if I'm to do a wrap up, is what comes on the top, I think, that you three share, is the fact that dashboards are about openness and about transparency. So it's very much mind change and organizational change, and putting up your metrics out in the open for everybody to see. And then the three of you focus on different aspects of, okay, what do you do then with that? Some of these dashboards could be in the open for all of your staff, or some of the dashboards could be in the open for the entire internet community, I guess. Besides the top 30 points that Angie made, that's excellent. Like, what are the things that would be used at your management level? I also thought it was interesting that Jeffrey mentioned this is about a project, and so you have a project, and then you look at a dashboard, and then, because I think that's the most important. And when you the three of you said that, when you have a question, you want to understand something, and so the dashboard is actually a tool to help you make sense of what's going on. You put a number of things together, and then in the case of Europeana, maybe you help others understand, and also in a way you understand yourself. And in the other cases, it's very much for internal understanding of how can you better give your service. I also find it interesting that Jeffrey said that this relationship between the online and the on-site, and well, everybody's dealing with this. Okay, you're measuring something for what and to what extent. Something that also came up for the three of you, not perhaps perhaps more as an under the table, you will say, is the fact that the information that you choose to gather and the way that you choose to present this information says a lot. Perhaps the most obvious example was Joris at the end saying that because in the political agenda they want to give clarity on the benefits of publishing open, so that's very much one of the indicators that they use. But I think that's common for all of the other presentations. I think, I mean, I guess I'm beyond my 1 minute, but I wanted, perhaps I can start with a question for all of them, for all of you guys, and then maybe Angie can begin, and then we go to the second speaker and the third speaker. I guess I have maybe, well, a number of questions, but one main question. When you're trying to understand something and you're choosing these metrics, what is the question that you have been wanting to answer and you have not found the right indicators for?
Oh, that's a tricky one. Sorry, just to confirm the question, are we talking about the one thing that we haven't been able to discover so far, or are we talking about the question that we're pursuing through our dashboard?
Yes, perhaps that's a good point. Well, yeah, I think because we're focusing on the dashboards, I guess maybe we can stay within the dashboard. But indeed, I mean, the dashboard is only one part of the entire question, you know, what we're doing. But perhaps more on the dashboard, is there something that you will be wanting to quantify? Or no, is there something that you want to answer that you have not been able to quantify correctly?
All right, okay. Well, I think when it comes to any dashboarding project, or any analytics project for that matter, having one line of inquiry, one question that you're going after is a great way to begin. I think that the big thing that we want to avoid doing is trying to boil the ocean by measuring everything and doing everything and displaying everything. So it really helps to ask a question in the first instance to be able to boil that down. Certainly from us, because we deal with lots of different museums and each one has a different question, if I were to try and summarize that across all of them, the number one thing that we're going for is understanding visitor behavior. And I think that for us that is a journey rather than something that we can necessarily tick off and say we've got visitor behavior done. I think it is a constantly evolving challenge. And so for us, concentrating on that mission helps us define our continuing scope of what we develop further in our dashboards.
Mm-hmm. Great.
Yeah, I think for us, we're getting a lot better at hearing about the questions that our stakeholders are interested in and figuring out how to answer them graphically in a dashboard. But the one thing I think we haven't been able to crack, and what is of great interest to us, is how we compare and how to other institutions in the sector. And you know, just imagine if museums had access to dashboards and the data would be exportable in a portable format to be able to kind of create the picture of the sector. And I think we could learn a lot from that. So one of the hot features on our next version we're talking about is just data export, right? So being able to take that data and port it elsewhere and compare it to other data. So yeah.
Great, thanks.
Yep. Some of the things you just said, Jeffrey, so we really would like to make it possible to export the data for all the institutions for them to compare themselves to others. That's one thing. There are a number of metrics we can visualize, but we basically have to decide which ones we should focus on, such as the download of content from the site. That is one that becomes more relevant. But one of the things that's really high on the wish list, but I'm not sure if it's possible at all, is visualize in a better way how if people find material on the Europeana website, that's only one source. That's our portal, our website. But obviously, these images, these sounds, these videos, they travel to other platforms as well. They're being used in Wikipedia articles. They're being used in blog posts. And I would very much like to be able to show the institutions where these images appear, where they end up, basically. But I'm not sure if that's possible. There is some stuff you can do with referral traffic, but it's tricky. But that would be, I think, it's so key for culture institutions publishing data online to get a sense of at least what's happening.
Great, thank you. Elena, I haven't been following Twitter. Do you know if there's questions from the Twitter community?
Yes, we have one question from Anne Botman, who is Head of Content Development at the Museum of Nature. She's asking, that question is for Jeffrey, who is actively using the dashboard. How is the uptake? But I think it could be applied as well to other speakers, like with Europeana partners, and maybe Angie, you can talk as an external viewer of museums, like how is like the working relationship like with stakeholders, who are the most like engaged users for using dashboards and data in general.
Yeah, so for us, as I said in the presentation, it was the first version of our dashboard was kind of our stab at like putting a tool out there and seeing, you know, what came back to us, and knowing that the primary audiences were the 4 museum directors, the president of the institution, the development department who needs to report on this stuff, and then we really used the marketing and communications teams who have probably a keener sense of analytics and that sort of thing than the museum leadership, to really kind of inform some nuances of how we were presenting things. And you know, so uptake, I think we're working to make it a more wider resource institutionally, because we think anybody who's interested in this stuff should be able to know about it. But I think as we iterate and as we get into the feedback loop and roll out new features, I think interest and usability throughout our institution will grow.
Joris, you had a...
Yeah. So for us, clearly the main audience is the data partners, the cultural institutions that we work with, to give them an insight how their collection is performing on Europeana, basically. And also here there is, it was a bit of a, we actually had some discussion about this, if we should put the dashboard behind a login, for example, so only you as an institution could have access to this kind of material. And in consultation with our network, we've decided not to, because we believe we are publicly funded institutions, so we should be transparent about this. And it indeed, after the launch, there was some people less happy. Also, yeah, of course, if your dashboard it looks less great, it might not be that cool. But in general, people are very happy and also willing to to make noise about it and to share it with other people within the institution, also outside of the institution. So I think that's I think it's a really nice indicator or something for where the sector is at the moment, that this kind of information is there to be shared. Hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Great, thanks. Angie? Yes.
I think in my view, definitely it is really important to instrument the uptake of the dashboard. So that's, I think, a really important takeaway from today, is to make sure that you're measuring that and continuously improving that as a metric in its own right. Our goal is certainly to make sure that at least every staff member has the opportunity for access to data, and I think that comes back to your point earlier in summation that dashboarding is very much about encouraging an open data culture. Anecdotally, off the top of my head, I would have to agree that certainly our audience seems to be mostly C-level and certainly very orientated towards marketing and visitor experience as the first people who really champion and have achieved high adoption within the organisation. But I think equally that's a challenge to all the other parts of the museum as well, to meet that same level of use.
I have another question, Elena. I'm not sure. Do you have another question from the audience?
There are a lot of positive comments. You will read them on Twitter later. I also try to tweet links to the dashboards and so on, and you can read them later. I just want to thank the speakers and go ahead with your question, Trilce.
Okay, well, my question is in Let's Get Real report from the Culture 24, where actually Elena also participated in. One of the points from institutions was that it was quite, it took a number of resources to do these dashboards, not only technical attention, but also in terms of time from the staff. So perhaps also starting with Jeffrey, what's your experience on that from an institutional perspective? And then maybe also some comments from the other two speakers about how to manage this extra work, let's say, to get the dashboard going.
Yeah, it certainly is work, and I think it's important if you're going to develop something internally, like we did, to consider it a project and realize that does the project meet the mission of the institution and the specific department in the institution? It was very easy for the innovation studio to say yes because we're tasked with this, right? And so I think considering it a project and realizing that, as with any technology projects these days, nothing is ever finished, right? So once you start something, you you commit to following it through and developing it and updating it, and so I think institutionally you have to have that conversation with your peeps, so.
Yeah, from Europeana's perspective, it's been on the wish list for 3 or 4 years basically to have a dashboard, but indeed it costs money and you need to have that. So we could only start the real development about a year ago, and still a bit on a shoestring. So we all have other jobs to do there as well. So it took a while to get it where it actually is now, and to get it right, because in the beginning we quite quickly had a dashboard, but I quickly noticed when you dig deeper there were all kinds of mistakes in the data, and then you better not have a dashboard than an incorrect dashboard. But one of the reasons for us for also being able to do it is that it saves us time at the moment. We don't have to do these manual reportings anymore. We can just, on the wish list is an export to PDF function, so we can also bring it to like meetings and stuff, but it saves us a lot of time in generating these manual reports. So that was also one of the reasons we were able to do this.
Okay.
I have a similar experience. We carry a full dev and data science team, so in terms of the amount of energy that goes in from our end is certainly a lot. But I think that speaks to the question of whether for each museum it's appropriate to build something in-house versus take an off-the-shelf solution. But I think just to re-emphasize that I think one of the core tenets of the business case of doing analytics and dashboards is certainly to reduce workload rather than add to it. And definitely those business benefits of whether it's less click accounting in the gallery to data entry through to emailing spreadsheets around the office. You're very much looking to add efficiency rather than add workload. So I think that's a really important part of it. Having said that, whether you build or buy, I think it is worthwhile considering a dashboard implementation as a project, and certainly making sure that enough time is spent on education and training rather than just development, again, to make sure that the usage is there and that people are using data appropriately.
Great, thank you. Elena, perhaps you have a question?
I think we only have a few more minutes.
Yeah, okay.
I think maybe you can, something that, you mentioned already, some of you, is about next steps in terms of, beta phase 2 if you can quickly summarize what you're thinking about the future of your work in dashboards. Could be about visualization, could be about more this exporting options. Yeah, we can quickly go through it. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. So we have, as I mentioned, we're soliciting feedback at this point. We have some issues filed on GitHub as bugs and feature add requests. I would, extend the offer to the broader museum sector. If there's something that you're interested in seeing on that, file an issue request on GitHub. But our roadmap is later this summer we're going to start working on version 2, ship it, and then gather feedback and work on the next version and keep it constantly iterating.
Yeah, for us, it's in a beta version because we're at the moment doing a lot of work on the back end, the stuff you don't see. There's a couple of risks in the dashboard for it to break at some point, so we want to avoid those as much as possible. And then in the next part, I mentioned a few of them. The raw data, I would like to be able to embed the visualizations. So if I'm an institution, I can embed the visualizations into my own website or blog post. And another thing, but that's quite Europeana specific, we are now able to categorize the content that we have in Europeana, for example, on image size and quality of the video, length of the video, to give more insights into that kind of information. So we have, it's a bit too much detail, but we have 4 tiers. In which tier does your content and data fall, basically? Yeah, that's it.
For us, I think we're fairly similar to the first response there. We've got a live solution in production, so we update that every couple of weeks with a new version. At the moment, we are concentrating on self-service data, personalization of dashboards for different users so that we can recommend to, say, a curatorial team what data points are most common to them. And to allow users, of course, to personalize what they're seeing. And a continuing area for us is a lot of research into determining visitor behavior from on-site presence and digital touch points. So that is always an area that's evolving for us and a continued investment focus.
Great.
This is great. Thank you very much. So Trilce and I appreciate you speaking today from different parts of the world, different time zones. It's been a very interesting discussion, and I'm looking forward to following those projects that I've been talking about. This video will be uploaded to the MCN YouTube channel. We will be sharing the link with the community, and I think a lot of people, based on feedback, people couldn't make it because they have meetings, or I'm sure people will really appreciate the examples and the experiences provided in terms of developing and implementing dashboards. So thanks a lot. We will continue doing as part of the data and insights special interest group. We will continue doing Hangouts. If you have any suggestions about topics, please let us know. We definitely plan to do things about data visualization, probably something about video metrics after the summer. So yeah, any suggestions are welcome. So send those to Trilce and myself.
Thanks.
So thanks a lot.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye.